Have you ever had a deceased pet return from beyond the grave? 1. Yes, absolutely. I've told this story on the subreddit before, but when my first dog had to go on after a long struggle with debilitating arthritis, I was devastated. My upstairs neighbors sent their Chihuahua, who often did sleepovers with us, down to spend the night with me that first night. She was an amazing cuddler and a great help. That night, I had an extremely vivid and slightly weird dream. I dreamt of my dog running pain-free down a beach with Adam West in his 1960s Batman outfit looking on, hands on his hips, nodding in approval. Mr. West died the day before my dog. I woke up and had a that was weird moment. I went to the bathroom, moving the Chihuahua from between my legs. When I opened the door to my bedroom, my dog's favorite ball, the only toy he ever played with, rolled across the hall. There was no physical way that could happen. I lived in a cellar with little to no airflow, and I had left the Chihuahua in the bed behind me. There was no one around. I was filled with a certainty that he was telling me he was okay and was waiting for me. I've always been a believer in the paranormal and have had other experiences I can't explain, but that was the one that convinced me 100%. Since then, I've occasionally dreamt of that dog and that beach. No Batman though, lol. A couple years later, my next dog got cancer. It was a long fight with a lot of sacrifices on both our parts. Multiple surgeries, chemotherapy, hormones, but she was losing, and we both knew it. The veterinary oncologist and I decided to stop treatment and just try to keep her as comfortable as possible for the next couple months, with the end coming. Around the time of that decision, I started to have vivid dreams that my first dog and the old neighbor's Chihuahua, who had passed about a year prior, were in my little studio apartment. The dreams were always like, oh, I better put some extra food/water out. Very matter of fact to my dream self that they were both just staying with us. Then one night, I was sitting on the couch, and it was getting late, so I decided to go to bed. I grabbed my phone, and as I did so, I hit the side button in the way that turns on the camera. This happens a lot, so I instinctively moved my thumb to shut off the camera. But in the less than a second that it took to do so, I very clearly saw my first dog jumping off the couch on my phone screen through the camera lens. It was so quick and so weird that even before it registered mentally, I had turned the camera back on. But I couldn't see him, of course. My sense of it all is that my boy and his cousin the Chihuahua knew my girl with the cancer didn't have a lot of time left and came back to get her, which is why I kept dreaming of them in the apartment and saw him on the camera. It will be a year since my girl with the cancer passed in the coming week. I'm hoping to get a visit in my dreams or something from her to mark the occasion. I miss her so much. 2. I was 8 years old. My best friends had just moved away, and I was super sad. Mom got me Boots the kitten. Every day Boots waited for me, looking out the window for when I got home from school. She slept with me every night, even though it was hard for her to climb my bunk bed. When Boots got older, my mom started letting her outside. One day, while we were home from getting groceries, I heard my mom gasp hard. She saw what I didn't. Boots had been struck by a vehicle. I was devastated. That night, when I was crying myself to sleep, I was curled up in fetal position. I always laid on the top bunk next to my window, and the moonlight was shining through. I heard scratching on the wood of the ladder, but I ignored it. Then I felt pressure behind my knees of a kitty curling up. She always slept there too. I twisted my upper body so I could get a look behind my knees without moving my legs. There she was, in the moonlight. Kinda see-through, but I could see her clearly. She was shimmery in the moonlight. I was shocked, blinked, and then she was gone, and the pressure was gone. I'm 33 now, and I know the difference between hallucination, imagination, and an experience, and that was an experience. I almost cry every time I retell this story. 3. I posted this a few years ago. It was a hard decision that we put off making. We kept thinking she would be fine, and she often did rally, but it became obvious that it was her time. We had her for 13 years, and we loved her dearly. She was a gentle and sweet German Shepherd mix. About a week or two after she was put down, I awoke thinking that it was morning, as the room was bright with light. I looked at the clock. It was just after 4 a.m. I soon realized that it wasn't daylight, but that there was a light on in the living room that was shining right into our bedroom. I got up and turned it off. I stumbled to the bathroom to pee, and as I was standing there peeing, I wondered about how that light came on all by itself. Weirder still, I realized that the light was on in the shower of the bathroom as well. I can be only partially awake and function. Probably why I didn't notice the second light right away. I had not left that light on either. I turned off the shower/bathroom light and went back to bed. As I lay in bed, I thought how weird those two lights being on were. I knew that I was the last one to go to bed, and that all the lights were off. I later checked with my wife and daughter, who both assured me that they did not get up in the middle of the light, let alone turn on any lights. Since I was a little freaked out, it took me a while to get sleepy again. I felt like I was drifting in and out, when suddenly I hear a scratching sound on the hard wood floors next to our bed. It was the exact T sound that our old dog used to make as she tried to get up from the floor. It was hard for her old bones, and she would stumble and struggle to get her footing on the slippery floor due to her advanced age. Her nails would make this distinctive sound on the floor as she struggled to get up. This gentle scratching sound lasted a few seconds. I was not asleep. As I said, I was drifting off, but very much aware of the morning chirping of the birds outside when I heard this noise. I knew it wasn't our other dog as he was sleeping on the bed with us. About 15 minutes go by and I hear the exact sound again. I wasn't freaked out by this experience at all. As it's happening, I feel that perhaps it is my dog telling me that we made the right decision in putting her down, which was very hard on us. We not only felt bad for having put her down, but also waiting too long to do it, and that we had selfishly caused her extra suffering. Hearing this made me feel like not only did we make the right decision, but we also made it at the right time. It helped me feel like she was there with me, and she is okay now. 4. My old boy Terry was an excellent dog. He was a big silly black lab/retriever with brindled bits on his muzzle and legs, apparently from a distant collie relative. He was loving and gentle, and I sobbed for weeks when he died at nearly 14 years old. He visits me all the time. He regularly comes to see me in dreams, where he's happy and healthy, looking shiny-coated and bushy-tailed like he was in his prime, eyes shining and tongue lolling out of his mouth in happiness. He plays with our current family dog in my dreams too. They would have loved each other in life. I was having issues sleeping one night and feeling very upset, and I remember getting up to possibly grab a drink or something. When I returned, his paw print was clearly visible on our leather couch, just like it used to be when he was alive, and would get off the couch to come with you to see what you were up to. I cried a lot, but was so pleased he'd left a sign for me. In my current house, we have a ghost cat named Davy. After the renovations were finished and my husband and I had lived here for a few weeks, I kept seeing a little white cat slipping round the corners of doors. I've had issues with hallucinating in the past, so I chalked it up to that, but after a while, when I kept seeing the little guy, I asked my husband if his aunt and uncle, who owned our house previously, had ever owned a white cat. They had. My husband was surprised that I'd asked, and even more surprised when I said I'd seen him. I learned the cat's name and also that he'd ruled the roost when he was still alive. We have 2 cats now, and occasionally they'll investigate something we can't see. My husband has also seen Davy and has heard him jumping off the bed upstairs, a distinctive thonk-thonk. It's important to note that my husband has never had any issues with hallucinations either. We frequently hear the sound of a cat collar clinking on the ceramic bowls we have for our cats, and I've heard purring in empty rooms. I do like living in this house. I can feel all the happiness that is here, and I'm pleased Davy feels safe enough to come back to visit. I love it every time I get to see him, or when Terry visits me in my dreams. 5. I grew up with a cantankerous old cat named Gally. Alright, he wasn't that bad, but he hated us kids. We were more chill with him when we got older. Gally had a bonded bestie, Oscar. Both were pretty young at the time, and Oscar had to be put down when I was tilled 3. Sometime in October. Gally got grumpier and lonelier after that, and was a pretty solitary cat ever since. Every year after that, during the month of October, we'd find him tearing up and down the stairs like he used to with Oscar. We were mostly joking when we said Oscar was back to play, but as Gally got older and less mobile, he still did it, and we started to really believe it. Now, October was something of a cursed month for our family cats. We lost 3 more before Gally died, all in October. He still raced up and down the stairs almost daily every time that month rolled around. He died one October, 14 years old, older than he probably should have made it. We found him as he was trying to ascend the stairs. He had almost made it to the top. Maybe he did. Maybe in his excitement to beat the others there, he accidentally left his body behind. Maybe Gally was the cursed one. We've lost 3 cats since, but no longer in October. His successor, Rain, seems to be the next fated to outlive too many cats. Her mother and brother are already on that list, but every year, around October, she'll spend a lot of time staring at the stairs, sitting at the bottom or top, and just observing. I know it's probably her memory or habit serving her, but I like to think she's watching them race still to this day. 6. Here's kind of a funny story. About 13 years ago now, I lived in a house with a backyard that butted up against a cul-de-sac/court with a wrought iron fence in between. At the time, I had a border collie dog, probably the best and smartest dog I've ever owned, who loved to chase squirrels. One squirrel in particular would get on the top bar of the fence and taunt my dog by running up and down the length of it, chattering away, the dog chasing back and forth at high speeds. barking furiously. The two of them would do this for 5 to 10 minutes daily. One day the squirrel stopped coming. Living against a cul-de-sac/court, we figured that it probably had gotten run over, or had died, or whatever. Almost 2 weeks passed and no squirrel. Then, one day, I let my dog out into the backyard and went to the kitchen to get myself a glass of water, and that's when I heard my dog start barking. I went back to the sliding glass door and looked out, thinking to myself the squirrel must be back. When I looked out, I saw my dog running back and forth along the fence line, looking up and barking. But there was no squirrel. She was doing this by herself, and it lasted for 5 to 10 minutes. This would happen occasionally for the rest of the time that we lived at that house. I still smile when I think back about it. It was weird. 7. As a kid, my entire family and I went to Six Flags over Georgia, except my older sister, who had to work. Our poodle, Charlie, of course, stayed home too. In the middle of the park, right by the Monster Plantation/Okefenokee Swamp Ride for those who know the park, I see our poodle Charlie run right in front of us, about 10 feet ahead, and then disappear. He was real looking until he disappeared. He wore a distinctive collar and had apricot coloring on his ears, so it was obvious it was him. I spun around and exclaimed to everyone about what I'd just seen. They didn't see anything and thought I was just kidding. WTF, right? This was decades before cell phones, so we didn't find out until we got home. As my older sister was leaving home for work, she'd accidentally let the dog out, and he'd immediately run into traffic and gotten hit by a car and killed. This happened around the same time as me seeing the dog. Additional story. My dad had a fantastic tomcat growing up. Apparently, it would follow him and his friends when they walked to the movies and then hang out in the bushes to walk back home with them. The cat died of old age when my dad was in high school. However, Dad swore he would feel the cat jumping on the bed when he turned off the light to go to sleep for several years. Even after he joined the Air Force, he'd feel the plop of a big tomcat jumping onto the bunk he was sleeping in. 8. I have of my late cat Fluffy when I was around 11 years old. She was someone who came into my life when I was at my darkest. Anyways, she passed away when I was around 11 years old. I was devastated. I watched her heart stop and her death was painful. I remember screaming to my mom, who was mowing the lawn, and screaming for her to save her. I didn't know what was going on. A part of my mom thought I was lying, so she stopped the lawnmower and said to me, so dramatic, she's probably just hot." That's when she saw Fluffy in a seizure-like convulsion on our porch, kinda coughing. It's hard to describe the sound she made, as it sounded like a gurgly cough. She looked at me with dread in her eyes and said, "I'm so sorry, Brandy, there's nothing we can do but comfort her as she goes." I remember falling and bawling by her side, petting her head and between her eyes, and as she looked at me she tried meowing. I remember my heart being shattered as I saw her eyes become glazed as her time ended. I sat there all day until the time came where I had to bury her. I buried her near a plant. I visited her every day and talked to her as I would in real life when she was here. 2 nights went by and I felt her jump on my bed and meow, which was impossible because my door was shut, and Fluffy hated inside, so she never came inside. She stayed in our mudroom. So when I heard her meow, I sat up quickly and said her name, and all of a sudden I felt her fur rub under my hand. I started crying and Elle said, "Hi baby girl, thank you for coming," and Elle said, "I love you, and I never want you ever forget how much you helped me. You're my best friend, and I won't forget you." As I finished my sentence, I heard her meow and she disappeared. I cried even harder knowing that she visited me to say her final goodbye. My mother later told me that she had a feline heart disease, kind of like a heart murmur. That's why she couldn't have kittened Anne. She had problems breathing Anne with her fur. There isn't a day that goes by I don't think about her. After all, she was my first feline companion, and the day I met her was one I won't ever forget, as it was so random. 9. Yes, when I was a very young kid, we had a German short-haired pointer named Chopper, who was 13 when he passed away. I was probably around 5 or 6. A couple years later, we got another GSP puppy named Turbo. Still going hard, he just turned 13 last month. But when he was a puppy, me and my mom were going to go to the grocery store. When we got back, my dad and brother weren't home, and I heard Turbo scratching and whining at the bedroom door. We used to put him in the bedroom when he was a puppy when nobody was home because we didn't want him roaming the house, not house-trained yet. So when we got home and heard that, my mom told me to go let him out. I go open the bedroom door and there's nobody in there. A few minutes later, my dad and brother walk in with Turbo. They took him for a walk when we were at the store. Me and my mom were both spooked for a second since we both heard the dog scratch the door and whine. But then my mom said maybe it was just Chopper saying hello. Can't think of any other explanation for hearing that, so I like to think that was my old buddy Chopper. My dad also has this touch-activated lamp in his room, And when Chopper was alive, he used to boop it with his nose to make it turn on, and now every once in a while the lamp will turn on by itself, and I like to think that's just Chopper coming to say hi to him. Some of my earliest memories are me and my brother playing with Chopper, so it's nice to think he comes and checks on us every once in a while. He was a good boy. 10. I was visiting Colorado with my mom, aunt, and grandma for a girls' week away. My dad stayed home to work and take care of the dogs, one being Hunter, our English Springer Spaniel. We knew he was getting up in age as he had started to slow down, but something took a left-hand turn on day 3 of our trip. He wouldn't eat and couldn't make it up the stairs. My dad took him to the vet, and the doctor said it was time. My dad brought him home so he could call us. We tried to get a flight out that day or the next, but we were having no luck due to snow. So on the 4th day, my dad took him to be put down. We were on the phone, the amp with him, just talking to him until he finally passed. Of course, we were beside ourselves that night, and I slept on the couch instead of the bed in the room I shared with my mom. I'm laying there crying, and all of a sudden Hunter licks my hand, like he always had, and whined a little. I don't know what came over me, but I knew he needed to go outside, so I got up, told him I love him and thank you. Then opened the door and watched him walk into the forest of the mountains. He looked back once, smiled, he did this all the time when he was happy, raised his top lips, wagged his tail, then finished his journey. I went back inside, suddenly feeling peace wash over me, and laid back down on the couch, scrolling my phone before falling asleep.